You can't always.
This is the death.
Remarkably empty.
Turn back towards God. Rise up.
Where is God in the midst of COVID-19? What is going to happen? Hello and welcome to Hope Spot on Shalom World. I'm your host, Robert Feduccia from Nashville, Tennessee in the United States. Hope Spot is designed to give you hope and insight for living during this time of global pandemic. And today's topic is the Christian response in the face of the pandemic. And joining us today from Steubenville, Ohio is Father Dave Pivonka. Father Dave is a Franciscan friar. He has devoted 35 years of his life to the work of evangelization. He is a video producer, and for the past year, he has served as the president of Franciscan University of Steubenville. Father Dave, welcome to the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you, Robert. Thanks so much.
And also joining us from Bangalore, India, we have Father George Kannanthanam. He is a social worker, he is a priest, and he is a tireless worker for those on the peripheries. Father George, it is an honor for you to join us today.
Very glad to be with you.
So, Father George, my first question is going to go to you. As we look at the Christian response to the global pandemic that we have right now, could you give us, a report card or a track record? Taking a look at the past, how has the church responded to things like this? And perhaps this is comparable to a natural disaster. So when things like this face humanity, what has the church done in the past and how has she responded?
Well, the church has been always in the forefront of fighting disasters and helping people in the times of disasters. 2004, when the tsunami happened in South Asia, I was the very next day in Tamil Nadu, which is our closest place to Bangalore. And traveling on the coast, I was so surprised to see so many organizations, many of them Christian organizations, involved with rescuing people, helping people to find shelter, feeding them. And we went on to work for about 2 years there, rebuilding about 7 villages. In 2015, when the major earthquake happened in Nepal, which is our neighboring country, I took the first flight from Delhi to Nepal on the second day. And I was so surprised to see numerous disaster management people from all over the world already coming to Delhi and traveling to Nepal. And most of them were Christian agencies and Christian personnel. Last year, we had a major flood in Kerala, in South India. And there, when I went to work, well, we have seen so many of our dioceses and religious congregations involved in the relief and rehabilitation work. So I have seen from my experience that the church is very alive and very, very present in every time there is a disaster happening. And so that's a very glad thing to see.
Mm. I'm struck as I was thinking about this interview with the two of you gentlemen. I went back to something that was very popular about 20 years ago, and many people were talking about the Chinese characters that you combined for the word crisis, and it is threat or danger and opportunity. When you combine those two, you have crisis. So here we are in this global pandemic crisis. It does present that. There's real danger, but also there is opportunity here in terms of how we can respond as Christians. So Father Dave, I want to go first to you. What are you seeing as the opportunities that are before us as a wider church and as Christians?
Yeah, Robert, that's really a great question. And that every situation such as this, you have an opportunity that you're going to have to avail yourself to. It's this particular pandemic. It's interesting. Obviously, we've never had anything like this before. So we can't go to a manual and say, okay, what do we do when we've got a global pandemic? This is what we should do. We don't have anything like that. So a couple of things that I've done here at the university, and I think it's important for us to bear in mind, is that while all of this is new or a surprise to us, we don't exactly know how to navigate it. That's not the case with the Lord. The Lord is the Lord of all things, and this isn't a surprise to him, and he's not thinking, oh my goodness, how did this happen, right? That he's been present to it. And so one of the things that I think it causes us to do is to really pray for a spirit of discernment. Lord, that this is in your mind and you have a path forward for us. One of the things that I encourage my faculty and staff is that we're obviously in the springtime here in the States, and the flowers were blossoming and the trees were blooming. And I was just thinking about how profoundly creative the Lord is. Well, if the Lord can do that with nature, he can do that with anything. And I really encouraged us to pray for a creative way forward in this. That we sometimes I think we expect some book or some article to tell us exactly what we're supposed to do. And my experience in this was that was not the case. Is the Lord was really inviting us to seek him, to seek his will, to discern his purposes, and then provide us a path forward to this. And in that sense, it's been really, in an odd sense, a really beautiful experience, and really having to trust in the Lord and be confident that he's going to lead us, be confident that he's present. As Father was saying earlier, that there are all kinds of opportunities for us to reach out to those who've been marginalized, and we just need to find creative ways to do it. And thank the Lord, we serve a God who's profoundly creative.
Mm. Amen. Father George, from your perspective, what would you say? How are we? I mean, we certainly see that there's dangers, there are threats, real serious threats. We have crossed the threshold of 100,000 deaths here in the United States, and that cannot be just swept over. Very dangerous is this beastly virus. Yet opportunities are in front of us. What are you seeing? What opportunities do you see in front of us?
Any person in a disaster, the first thing that they would do is to pray to God. And they expect something to happen. So if there is no positive interventions happening in that person's life, they can lose hope. They can lose faith in God. They can lose faith in humanity. So in this situation that the world is going through, when people are really in a fight with God to find meaning in their lives, I think we have a great opportunity to become a compassionate companion for the people. That is what the church is called to be. If we can be meaningfully present in the lives of those people who are physically suffering, maybe those who are dying, their family members, and also numerous other places where people are also economically struggling today. So if we can become a meaningful presence at this time, I think there is a great opportunity for helping people to find God through this crisis.
Yeah, I'm struck as you talk about that. I'm reminded of Pope Francis's charge that we are to be a people of accompaniment, that we are to walk with others. How are you seeing that, Father George, in your setting? How are you seeing people truly be accompanying with those who are in these marginal situations or on the peripheries?
Well, the difference between the West and the East probably is the issue that COVID is more of a medical problem in the West, whereas here in places like India, it has also created a great economic problem. India has about 450 million migrant population within the country, which is more than the population of the US. And because of the lockdown, many of these people are in an economic crisis. They have not been able to move, and many of them are today walking back to their villages, which is hundreds of kilometers away. And therefore, the effort of the church has been to ensure that these people have food, that these people have a shelter. So the Bangalore Archdiocese, where I belong to, Archbishop Peter opened up various schools and told these people, come and stay here. So they are provided shelter. The Social Service Society of the Archdiocese, headed by Father Naveen, he has been working day in and day out to ensure that all these people are having a food on their table. The Jesuit Society picked up, thousands of, packets of food every day and ensured that they are not starving. And this aspect of the church being present in various parts of the country, in Mumbai, it was Cardinal Gracious who told all his 124 parishes that nobody in your parish must be starving. And so they started a huge program of distribution of food. The same was done in Calcutta by the Mother Teresa Sisters, the Missionaries of Charity, reaching out to more than 60,000 people. So we are finding that this problem that is created is in some way meaningfully responded by the church. And it is a very good news that we are preaching through our action.
Father Dave, going to you, the topic today is the Christian response. How do we respond to this pandemic? Could you give us some insight into how, as a universal church, we can respond?
Yeah, I think in many ways, honestly, it's a similar response, universal church, and as we narrow it down, and that is at the heart of Christianity is ultimately a love for the person, right? And I think a danger is that we can get lost in the virus, in the medical, in the economic. All those things are important, but it's the human person that has to be key. So as we're trying to figure out what it is that we're supposed to do, we cannot lose sight of that it is a person in front of us that need to be, as Father was mentioning earlier, that sometimes need to be fed, need to be cared for, need health care, need shelter, need protection, ultimately need love. So one of the things, the images that has just been so stirring for me during this whole pandemic was the one of the Holy Father praying, and that was a Friday afternoon, late March, early April. I don't remember, Robert, but just that image of him by himself, but gathering together this community, this worldwide community, coming together and praying. And if we paid attention to these intercessions, it was always for the individual, right? It was for the person that's struggling in the midst of this. So I think that's one of them, is the church needs to recognize that she, particularly in the Holy Father and the image that he provides to us as a source of unity, draws people together. I think one of the things that the Universal Church can do as well is provide a sense of hope, is that people's experiences are such that many are so discouraged. Father, I think you're right. Ultimately, when this is all said and done, this may be more of an economic disaster than a health disaster, and the impact that it's had on so many people. So again, in the midst of all that, the church provides us a sense of hope.
Father George, we heard from Father Dave that this sense of really global solidarity, focus on the individual regardless of borders, and the sense of hope that comes from the Universal Church. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? What are the ways that the Universal Church can respond to this pandemic?
I feel there is a need for a policy decision at the highest level in the church to ensure that management of disasters becomes an integral part of the life and mission of the church. Well, Laudato Si have done that at the universal level. Pope Francis has given the guidelines, but I think still we need to work on the bishops' conferences, the congregations, the dioceses coming out with a strong statement that, well, involving with life of the people in disasters is an integral part of our life. That is the first thing to be done. Number two would be to create the structures that would ensure that this translates into action. We need working groups, we need committees that can coordinate and create the strategies required for it. Number three would be to ensure that there is enough of resources allocated so that these efforts can be meaningful. Only when we have all these three put together, we will be able to respond to such disasters, which is not only just COVID, but as we know, every country in the world is facing a disaster or other, probably every year or other. And then we need to respond to it. And so this is what is required.
Yeah. I have heard it said that John Paul II, Saint John Paul II, was the fire of God, Pope Benedict was the mind of God, and what Pope Francis is the hands of God. So, Father George, you had mentioned the real, concrete, practical things. So, as we come down we are inspired by the universal church. We see how the universal church unites us, just as Father David mentioned. But our faith gets lived practically within the parish context. Father George, what would you recommend the parish response be in the face of this pandemic? Here in Brentwood, Tennessee, where I am, the connection to Bangalore, what can I and my parish do in response?
The Catholic parishes are everywhere in the world. And if every parish takes the responsibility of the care of the people in their territory, not just the Catholics, but everyone in their territory, and reach out to the people in need in that place, then I think the whole church can be meaningfully present everywhere in the world. You need to have volunteers developed at the level of the parishes to respond to such situations. Our churches, institutions need to spend resources available with them when times of disasters happen. Because when things like this happen, we cannot hold back. The maximum amount of resources, personnel, and efforts has to be ensured. The second thing that we need to do is probably to create a database of people who are most vulnerable. The people who are elderly, people with disabilities, people who are widows, people who are migrants. If we can create a database of all these people who are vulnerable in our parish limits, it would be very easy for us to respond in times of need. The third thing would be to utilize the resources available in the parish. Many of our parishes are quite resourceful, but we probably don't spend all that we have for an emergency like this. So I think without holding anything back, seeing this as a global disaster, we need to maximize all our resources and go all out, both in terms of resources and personnel, and do our best. That is the best way to deal with this pandemic that we are facing.
Yeah, and it really is too, as you're saying, to step out in faith with our resources. And Father Dave, you and I were talking about how at Franciscan University of Steubenville, you have done that. You've really stepped out in faith. So could I ask, how have you personally responded to this? What have been the challenges, and how have you responded in the face of all of those?
Yeah, well, obviously, this has provided, and Father could speak to this as well. The thought of not being able to celebrate the Mass with the people of God, I mean, I never thought something like that would happen. So it's been, it's been a suffering, it's been a difficulty, it's been a sadness, it's been a longing, it's been a loneliness. And unique to our faith, I find God in the middle of that. In a weird, strange way, also standing in the gap, offering the Eucharist, offering liturgy, offering prayer for those people that aren't able to join us. I mean, be able to join us virtually, but that's different, right? So a real sense of the priest standing in the gap for the people of God. From that perspective, it's been tremendously difficult, and yet there's been an intimacy that I've experienced with the Lord that's been really beautiful.
Wow, but your response goes to the very heart of the priesthood. Standing in the gap, as you said, and so I take that as a challenge with the priesthood of all believers, as an intercessor to stand in the gap for those. So, Father George, finally to you, how have you responded? What has been your individual response in the face of this pandemic?
Well, as soon as we got to know about these troubles that are happening in China, we decided to send one of our staff, Sibu George, to China with the face mask, about 10,000 face masks. Later, from the 2nd of April till today, every day we have been out in the field where people have been without food, without provisions, and every day to about 200 to 300 families, we have been taking what we call a survival kit, which has about 20 kilos of provisions. We have been working with so many organizations and ensuring that this is reaching to the people in the peripheries, people with disabilities, people affected by HIV and AIDS, the leprosy colonies, the migrant groups. So we have been able to reach out to about 15,000 families in the last 2 months. Apart from this, one of our co-partner agencies called ECHO, under the leadership of Father Anthony. They have been every day serving food for about 700 to 800 people. And then we also, in fact, tomorrow we are moving out of Bangalore to an interior forest area where the tribal people are left without any support. So we're going to spend 2 days with them carrying the survival kits for about 400 tribal families deep inside the forest.
Father George, thank you so much for what you're doing and how I feel inspired to continue to respond. So Father George Kannanthanam, thank you very much for joining us today on Hope Spot.
Welcome. Thank you.
And Father Dave Pivonka, President of Franciscan University of Steubenville, thanks to you as well for sharing with us.
That's my pleasure. Thanks so much, Robert.
And so I'm very struck that we are united as a universal church, that without borders, we are a church, and we can step out in faith, we can be practical with it, and we can give Christian witness to those around us and live in solidarity and live in relationship and accompaniment with them. My brothers and sisters, if this is a blessing to you, please come to shalomworld.org, download our app, and join us next time here at Hope Spot on Shalom World.
To all of the viewers of Shalom TV throughout the world, I want to encourage you not only to support this amazing media apostolate, but to spread the word to others. We all know how the internet and mass media are polluting the world with the poison of pornography and so much other forms of materialism. This is the source of eternal life, the gospel, and Shalom TV is consecrated to spreading the word of Christ. Thank you.